Hello, welcome to a tutorial on creating a simple game, which is going to be a cursor maze game in which you use the mouse cursor to navigate your player character. And the world is constantly scrolling, so you have to dodge the walls to get to the end point. So let me just show you what the base game is going to be like. So if I have a cursor like this, if I touch the red walls, then I'm forced to restart the level. But I can use the mouse scroll wheel to rotate my character. And if I navigate this correctly, then you can see that I got to the end point here, which is this little warp hole. So if you're watching this tutorial because you're in my class, then you will have been provided a project folder to work off of. So I'm going to just go ahead and show you how to do that. So if the project folder, the zipped folder, is called Cursor Maze, then you want to extract that folder to wherever you're going to be working. I have a folder for Unity projects, so I'm going to extract it there. Now that's there. Yep. I'm going to go ahead and open the project using Unity. Go to File, Open Project, and hit this little open symbol. And it's already on my default folder for Unity projects, so that's great. Cursor Maze is here, and it's complaining that it's not a Unity project. That's because when I extracted it, it put it in a folder itself, so you might have to click into this and then click the second folder, which is called Cursor Maze. So select that folder. So as this opens up, you will have a couple folders that you'll notice. One which is called prefabs, the other which is called sprites. The sprites folder just holds the sprites basically for the prefabs, and also the first map that we'll be using to test our game with. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag both of these prefabs into the scene here. It didn't mess up on mine, but you might want to check. Here you can notice that if we click on player or any of its components, that the sorting layer says unknown layer. That did not get imported when I saved the folder, so we're going to add a sorting layer. We're going to call that sorting layer player. And we're just going to select everything under player, and that sprite renderer layer is going to be player. One other thing is that this should be some layer number below everything else, because we want his little body there to render behind everything else. So anything that's you notice I have the iris here as a higher order in the layer than the eyeball, because I want that to render on top, and so the player body I want to have a lower number than that, so I can even give it a negative number, so that works. So the first thing we're going to accomplish is we're going to create our controller for the player. So to do that, we're going to hit add component over here. We're going to create a new script. I'm going to call it player controller. Hit new script. Create an add. We'll wait for Visual Studio to load. Oh, it didn't double click, that's why. So let's just make some comments here and think about the basics of what we want to accomplish. So what we'll need is we'll need to grab the data of the cursor data. So we'll need the cursor position. We'll say we'll grab cursor position. And then we need to set our player position to be equal to the cursor position. And this isn't obvious, but the way Unity works is we're going to have to convert it into world space. So world space means, as if we look back into our scene view, any of this space that we're working with actual physical coordinates, that's world space, whereas screen space uses properties of the screen, like the resolution of the screen, to calculate position there. So we need to work with our coordinates of world space. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. Let's make a new local variable, and we'll call that cursor. We're going to make that a vector3. Call that cursor position. You'll notice when I'm making these names, I'll use Camelback, which means the first letter of my variables will be lowercase, while any others starting words will start with uppercase. So it's kind of like the norm to name variables this way, but we name our functions capitalized, like you see in start and update here. So this new vector3, vector3 is a position in XYZ space, as you can see in transform here, XYZ. That there would be a vector. And we need to get the world space of this cursor position. So we can do sort of a trick in which we locate the camera in the scene, and we get the first enabled main camera, and we use this function screen to world point, and we're going to feed in the input vector input dot mouse position into here. If that's confusing, that's okay. This is very syntactically complex, so this is something that even I have to sort of look up into the Unity documentation and clarify how to accomplish something like this. So one line of code, we can well, right after we set the transform of our player character to this cursor position, so we just say transform dot position, and we set that equal to the cursor position that we found in world space right there. We can go ahead and test this. Let me see, we got it moving. but it's not quite. It's acting a little funny here. It's not matching my cursor. If I maximize this on play, it's a little funky. Oh, it's because this here is supposed to be screen to world point, and I accidentally clicked screen to viewpoint. So we'll try that again. And if you see in the scene view, it is moving along with my cursor, but it's not being shown on screen. And the reason for that is that if you look over here in the Z position, we're setting the Z to equal the camera, which is also -10. It's 10 behind your origin here, because we want to be able to see everything. That's how cameras work. So our mistake here is that we don't want to feed in to our new position. We don't want to feed in the Z position. So to avoid that, we're just going to do a whole new vector, and we're going to feed in the first X and Y, but not the Z. So we're going to do cursor position dot X, cursor position dot Y, and our Z we're going to keep at 0. We could make this a variable, but I don't foresee us needing to move the player into and out of the foreground, so we'll just keep it at 0. Now we can go ahead and test that. So you can see it's moving along with our cursor. But two things with this. One, we can see the cursor still, and that's a little annoying. And two, if you notice, if my cursor is in a weird position, my player is off screen. So it's good that it'll follow my cursor into the right position, but I need to, I would prefer to make sure that the character starts on screen as the level begins. So the way we're going to do that is a little trick, and I'll explain it after I write it. So we set screen cursor copy and paste, but make that false, and then cursor dot visible. Alright, so the little trick that I'm doing here is first I am calling lock cursor. So what that does is that it's going to take the cursor and it's going to put it immediately into the center of the screen. You'll notice if I leave lock cursor as true, then my cursor will go into the middle of the screen. It'll be invisible, but because it's locked, then I won't be able to actually move my character. So I hit escape there to get out of lock cursor. So just immediately I'm just gonna make lock cursor false. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the centering the cursor part of this, but sort of negating the locking the screen so that I can't move the cursor. And then I'm making the cursor invisible. So now we can see that our player character is working correctly. So I apologize, I'm still learning this screen recording thing, so there's going to be some jumpy edits and stuff like that. But the next thing that we want to do is we want to add the rotation functionality to our player input. So if you go back into the script, let's think about what we want to do in pseudocode again. So first we want to get the input from our scroll wheel. We want to use that to set the rotation. So set player rotation to whatever we get from a scroll wheel. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to listen for an input dot, and the way we're going to do this is we're going to do get axis, and it's called mouse scroll wheel, and I'll tell you why in a second. And as long as that axis is not equal 0, so this means that there's some change happening. This is strange, right? There we go. We always want to make sure that our brackets match, our closing brackets match our opening brackets. So that's what I'm doing there. So we want, right, so if we look back in Unity and we go into edit, project settings, input, you can see that Unity has a set of axes that are predefined by Unity. We can edit these. These are the default names, but we can edit this and make this mouse X can be bang button or something like that, but I don't want to do that. So I didn't mean to edit that. So if you look here, mouse scroll wheel is listed, and just like horizontal and vertical, you might grab those for a platformer game to detect if like the thumbstick is going left or right. It's the same here for mouse scroll wheel. We're detecting if there's a positive or negative change in the scroll wheel. So what we're going to do with that is if we get the mouse scroll wheel, we're going to take the transform that's attached to the script, or the transform that this script is attached to, rather, and we're going to change the Euler angles. So there's two ways you can modify rotation. Is if you use transform dot rotation, then you're working with, let me show you where you're working with quaternion, which is not it's not very easy to work with, and local Euler angles is more familiar. It's more what we're attuned to as we're editing in the editor. So and we're going to add whatever rotation we currently have. We're going to take whatever rotation we currently have, we're going to add our changes. So we're going to do plus equals. Remember, this is shorthand to whatever's on the right side, add that to the left side. Oops. And we're going to do a new vector 3. And we're not changing the x or y, so we leave those unchanged. We're adding nothing. Add 0, add 0. And we're going to get the input just like in our check for mouse scroll wheel, and make sure that we have our semicolon at the end of any statement here. So, and that'll work. But as you can see, did I save it? Yep. When I hit play, and I am scrolling a lot here. Let me not maximize this so you can see in the right hand window. Wait, actually this is not scrolling at all. I'm just going to do... What's happening here? Misspell something? Oh, okay. So I have capitalized on one. This is the most annoying thing. Half of your problems when you're programming, not half of them, but I make this mistake all the time. Whenever you're using quotations to specifically refer to something, that has to match exactly the case, and the spelling, the spacing, everything has to match perfectly. And here I did not capitalize wheel. So let's try this again. You can see that it's actually rotating, but it's rotating by a very small amount. So it'd be helpful for us if we can have some sort of variable that we can control, so we can control the rotation speed when we rotate this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in here, and before any of our functions, outside any of our functions, I'm going to declare a public float. I guess we don't really need to be that specific. We can do an integer, and we'll do spin speed. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply. So what we're adding to the z-axis, we're just going to multiply by some amount, spin speed. If I save this and we go back into our script, since I made that public in the editor, we can now tinker with this and make this what we want. So if I do 50, I'm multiplying 50 to the amount, so you can see that's actually it's a pretty decent little rotation there. In my previous version I had done 90, so maybe we can keep it at that. That's what I'm used to, so I like that. I'm going to keep it at 90, but you can mess around with it. Alright, and I think that does it for our player controller. We have the functionality that we want. We can move the player around on the screen, and we can also rotate the dude around. So in the next video we'll talk about setting for our first level up, and getting our game manager working, and then tying up all the loose ends so that we have our first complete basic level.